Thank you. I'm Patti. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm grateful to be sober. I'm especially grateful to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank you all for inviting me. I want to thank Kathy and her son Jason for picking me up at the airport. I think it's only in Alcoholics Anonymous where somebody would get on an airplane several thousand miles away at just before the crack of dawn, head off for someplace that they're not really sure where they're going to be met by somebody they've never seen before. Get off the airplane and just assume that whoever approaches you is going to be the person who's looking for you. And I get off the airplane and I sort of judge people as I'm getting off. Well, that one doesn't look like an alcoholic. Well, that one does. Well, that one doesn't. That one does. And you know, one of these days somebody's going to walk up to me and say, "Hi, I'm da-da-da-da-da, come with me," and I'm going to say, "Okay," and that's going to be the end of me. I think it's only in Alcoholics Anonymous that you have that kind of faith or stupidity, whatever. They've always told me this is not the bedrock of mental health, but so I'm glad that Kathy found me before somebody who wanted to do damage to me found me and took me off. I'm really grateful to be here. You know what? It's awfully warm here. I'm from Southern California. We don't have this kind of oven effect, but I always wear more clothes than I need to wear anyway because I have a tendency to undress as I'm talking, and I find it much safer to start with the layered effect, so I don't. And I wear silk because I like to touch myself, so I'm just going to be up here touching myself, undressing for the next hour. I have learned in Alcoholics Anonymous not to carry fire in my pocket. When you like to touch yourself, if you have fire in your pocket, it could be dangerous. I was giving a talk one night. I had a lighter in my pocket, and I was touching myself and playing and just having, and I don't know how it happened, but the lighter ignited. And if you're wearing silk and the lighter ignites, it just doesn't take much to just set you ablaze. And I'm giving my talk, and I just set myself on fire. And I've been CPA first aid certified, so I know it's stop, drop, and roll. So I start myself on fire. It shocked me for a second, and then I went to the floor. Now, I'm a compulsive talker, so I took the microphone with me, and just kind of rolled myself out behind the podium, got back up, put the microphone back, kept talking, never missed a word of my talk, was practically naked for the last 45 minutes, and so I have learned from that experience not to carry fire in my pocket, and that's my recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. My recovery here is after I've done it once, I have a choice to do it again or not. And you see, the insanity of my disease was I always did the same thing over and over and over, and I somehow expected the result would be different. I'm interested tomorrow. I'm always interested in conventions for the corrections panel exhibit. I always look to see if my picture's there. But I'm one of those folks, I'm driving down the street and the light comes on behind me, and I know what that means, so I pull over. And the officer walks up to the door, and the first thing I try to do is knock his private parts off with the door. I just slam the door open, and men are a little nervous about their private parts, so I slam the door open, he jumps back. Now, this is a good thing because now I have him in focus. And I'm looking at him and thinking, one of him, one of me. One of him, one of me, I think I can take him. One of him, one of me, this looks like a fair fight. One of him, one of me, I think I'll try, and I go out the car after him. Now, it's a fair fight for a minute, but it never occurs to me that he's got a friend with him. And the friend has the radio, and the friend calls some more friends. And pretty soon it's 6 of them, 1 of me. It's not any fair anymore. So, of course, I smile, say, "Uncle," and I get cuffed, and they take me off. But the next time the light comes on behind me, I pull over. The policeman comes up to the door. I slam the door open, try and knock his private parts off. He jumps back. I get him in focus. I think one of him, one of me. One of him, one of me, I think I can take him. One of him, one of me, it looks like a fair fight. One of him, one of me, I think I'll try, and I go out the door for him. I don't think about the friend. I don't think about the radio. I don't think about the friend's friends. Next thing I know, it's 6 of them, 1 of me. It's not a fair fight anymore. I say, "Uncle." They cuff me and they take me away. But the next time the light comes on, the officer walks up, I slam the door open, he jumps back, I think, and that's the insanity of my disease. I didn't do that once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I did that 12 times. I never thought about the friends. I never thought about the radio. I never thought about the friends' friends. And that's the insanity. I do the same thing over and over and over. And I somehow think the result is going to get different. My recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have only had to start myself on fire from a podium once. Okay, here we go. Boy, at least one thing in Jackson, Mississippi, you know it's not a hot flash. I mean, this is for real heat here. My sponsor always says when I do this, I should tell you my name and tell you the truth. I've told you my name. I'm not so sure I'm going to tell you the truth. And the reason for that is simple. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but I never knew the truth was going to be important. When I was out there drinking, I didn't know the day would come that I would end up in Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know the day would come that I would be expected to report to you what it used to be like. If I had known I was going to end up here, if I had known what it used to be like was going to be important, if I had known I was going to have to report it to you, I would have taken notes. I would have paid attention to my life. If I would have known I was going to report it, I would not have done some of the things that I did. But I didn't know it was going to be important, so I didn't pay attention. So what I share with you may or may not be the truth. What I share with you is my perception of what it used to be like. What I share with you, a lot of it was reported to me by other people. I have to assume they told me the truth. I have a job. I had to get a fingerprint clearance, and I fingerprint really, really well. I've had a lot of experience fingerprinting. And I know how to fingerprint. I know how to roll with it. You know, you don't try and fight it. You just roll with it. I fingerprint really, really well. And I'm being fingerprinted. I didn't want to raise any red flags, so I very cautiously and calmly said to the woman fingerprinting me, I said, how far back are you going to check? She looked me in the eye and said, from the day you were born. And I thought, oh, geez, it's like a fifth step, only it's in the wrong order, because they're going to know about it before I do. And I'm going to tell you, I know a lot more about what it used to be like since I got that report than I knew before. They called me up. When the report came in, they called me up, and the woman was not an alcoholic, and I don't know how many of you know non-alcoholics other than Al-Anons who really don't count as normal, but non-alcoholics, they're really very strange. I think they ought to have a program for them. They're very, my next-door neighbors are not alcoholic, and they're very, very, very weird. They're married to each other, have been married forever. I don't think they've ever had an argument. They take a beer out of the refrigerator, and not even a good size. I mean, I call them shooter beers, the little ones. They take a beer out of, and they share it. And the one who is not holding the beer doesn't seem to be concerned that they're not holding the beer. And then one of them will take a drink, and the one who's not drinking is not monitoring how much the one who is drinking is drinking. And then they'll put the beer down, and they'll ignore the beer for minutes. Hours days seem to go by. And then all of a sudden, one of them will say to the other, honey, where's the beer? Honey doesn't know. I know where the beer is. And I live next door. I know where it is. But those people have a way that they talk to us. They're like, really, this woman calls me up when my fingerprint report came in, and she just had that tone that I can't even mimic. And she says, your report just came back, and she said, normally these reports are 2 or 3 pages long. She said, yours was 56 pages. Do you want to come see it? Well, of course I wanted to come see it. I need to know. And I knew I was I did not know how much of a blackout drinker I was until I read that report. And I like blackouts. I mean, I really feel sorry for Al-Anons. They have to live every minute of every day. I love blackouts. I can't think of anything more wonderful than leaving work on August 3rd, going back to work on September 17th, having a ton of money in the bank, and having been at work every day. I mean, it just makes the year go by so much quicker. But I was a bigger blackout drinker than I even thought. But so what I'm going to share with you is my perspective of what it used to be like, and it may or may not be the truth. I had my first drink when I was 13 years old. I'm sorry I waited that long, but I didn't know what alcohol would do to me or for me. I didn't have any illusions about alcohol. I don't remember ever thinking, I can't wait until I drink. I don't remember ever thinking I would never drink. I mean, I don't remember thinking about alcohol at all. And yet, when I was 13 years old, I was on a camping trip in Southern California with a group of girls. We were camped at the beach, and we got into the tent that first night, and I had a bottle of vodka in my pillowcase. And to this day, I don't know where that bottle came from. I believe it was the grace of God, but I can never be sure. But I remember being excited about having it. And I asked if anybody wanted any, and they didn't. And the reason they gave me for not wanting it was all we had to mix with it was grape soda and root beer. And I said, well, so what? And I took off the top, and I drank half the bottle, and I looked around the tent, and nothing had gotten different, and nothing had changed. So I drank the second half of the bottle, and that was to be the end of my social drinking. Never again after that day did I ever offer anybody a drink out of my bottle. And I don't know about any of you, but I never had resentments until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of my early resentments in Alcoholics Anonymous is I heard you talk about your first drink, and you talked about taking the drink, and you felt the alcohol in your mouth. And you felt the fire as it went down your throat, and you somehow felt it as it went down and it hit your stomach and it exploded, and it went to your fingernails and your toenails, and your pimples fell off, and you grew a few inches taller, and you dropped about 80 pounds, and you became Prince Charles, and I mean, just wonderful things happened to you, and that wasn't the case for me. I had my first drink of alcohol, absolutely nothing happened to me for about 15 minutes. And at the end of the 15 minutes, the only thing that happened to me is I had to go to the bathroom. And it's my belief tonight that if you were to drink a quart of anything, in about 15 minutes, you would have to go to the bathroom. And I remember getting out of the tent, and I shuffled through the sand to the outhouse, and I went in and went to the bathroom. And when I got done and went to get up, I realized I was absolutely and totally 100% paralyzed to the toilet seat. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. I didn't feel my heart beating, and I was overcome with a sense of fear. And of course, the fear was that somebody else was going to have to come use that outhouse, and there I was, paralyzed to the toilet seat. Now, later in my drinking, I did discover that two people can use the same toilet at the same time if the second person is very careful about what they're doing. But I didn't know that at 13, and what I did, I somehow I intuitively knew that the body was made up of energy. And I somehow figured, paralyzed to the toilet seat, that if I could gather my energy, I would be all right. And so I suppose it was my first formal meditation, because I sat and I gathered my energy. And when it seemed to be all centrally located, when I seemed to have it all gathered up, I just sort of fell off the toilet, out the door, into the sand, and started crawling back to the tent. Now, since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I've discovered that my entire problem that night was my attitude. If my attitude would have been right, I could have had a fantasy that I was in the Marines, and I was being dive bombed as I was trying to get back to safety. And if my attitude would have been right, I guess it could have been a wonderful experience. In my own defense, I have to tell you, my pants were still down at my ankles. I had started to get sick. I couldn't quite get through it, and I couldn't get around it. And I think under those circumstances, it's a little difficult to have a good attitude. I did somehow manage to get back to the tent. I fell in, and I passed out. And when I came to in the morning, I realized nobody was in the tent with me, and I couldn't figure out where they went until my eyes cleared enough that I realized I'd been sick all night long. I'd hit the top of the tent, the floor of the tent, the side. I hadn't missed a square inch, and quite frankly, I didn't want to be in the tent either. So I got out of there, and that was my first drink of alcohol, and it was the most wonderful, incredible, marvelous, magnificent, spiritual, fabulous experience I've ever had. And it must have been because I put some amount of alcohol into my body from that day until the day I came through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't always get drunk, and I didn't always drink the kinds of things that you would classify as a beverage. I drank a lot of vanilla extract. I used to buy it by the six-pack. I remember the day the manager of the market called me over, and he said, Patti, I can't let you buy vanilla extract anymore. He said, I can't believe anybody bakes as much as you do. And I got cut off from that supply. I drank a lot of mouthwash. I drank a lot of perfume. Taboo became my after-dinner drink of choice. I still have a problem. If you're wearing it, I may follow you too closely and laugh at your neck. I'm often tempted when I share to introduce myself and say I'm Patti and I'm a pig. Because I ate, drank, shot, snorted, shoved, crammed, rammed, anything that felt good. I came to your house and ate and drank everything in your bathroom. But alcohol is my drug of choice. I love alcohol. I love everything about alcohol. And what drug of choice means for me is if there's a bottle of Jack Daniels there, some marijuana, some cocaine, some stuff. Drug of choice means I drink the Jack Daniels first, and then I do everything else. And I don't know that my life is any different than anybody else. I don't know that that anything I'm doing is strange or odd or bizarre. I mean, I don't know that it's different. And you know, how would I know that? I became a bar drinker. I was a living room drinker, a bedroom drinker, a kitchen drinker, an office drinker, an alley drinker, a car drinker, a dumpster drinker. I didn't really specialize. I just drank. But I became a bar drinker. I love sleazy bars. I love really, really sleazy bars. The ones, I'm sure none of you look like you ever drank in one, but so I'll describe them for you. The ones with sawdust on the floor and the mirrors are cracked, and I especially love them if the upholstery on the bar is ripped where people have tried to hold on as they're falling off their stool, and they're full of smoke and they have that wonderful used booze urine smell that I just salivate thinking about it. I love that smell. There's a place on my way to work, Paul's Cocktails, that opens at 6 a.m. Some mornings I just stop there to get a whiff on my way in just because I love that smell. But, you know, in retrospect, I think about the quality of people who drank there. I mean, considering how sleazy those places were, the quality of people fascinates me. There were CEOs of huge companies. There were bank presidents. There were neurosurgeons. There were admirals in the, I mean, that's what they said they were. And I never lied in a bar. But, you know, we weren't having conversations like, well, what do you prefer, the red mouthwash or the green? Well, what's your preference, Chantilly or Aqua Velva? We weren't having those kinds of conversations. So how do I know that my life's any different than anybody else's? I think I drink because I want to drink. I don't know that I don't have a choice. I don't know that at 13 years old I put alcohol into an alcoholic body, and from that day on I had no choice. I think I drink because I want to drink. I had an opportunity to go to college. I did very well. Chronic, hopeless, helpless alcoholic, drinking on a daily basis. I graduated from college with a 3.8 grade point average. And I share that with you because it almost killed me in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I came here, I told you I was too smart to be an alcoholic. Nobody with a 3.8 grade point average could possibly be an alcoholic. I stayed in college and took classes for a master's degree. I left college. I went to school in San Diego, which is the southern tip of California. I was offered a job in Chico, California, which is the northern tip of California, and I got about 82 miles north of San Diego. I got to Santa Ana, which is not the place where you want to be thirsty. I was thirsty. I pulled off the freeway. I pulled into the parking lot of this dive. I can find them. I have a sense. I don't need to even know. I can just, like radar, I can find them. I walked in. It was full of smoke. It had that wonderful smell. Willie Nelson was singing on the jukebox, and I knew I was home. That's as far north as I ever got, about 82 miles from where I started from. Alcohol had become my mother, my father, my God, my lover, my friend, my companion, my support. And at some point it had turned, and it began to strip me of self-esteem, self-worth, decency, integrity, honesty, pride, all the things we have going for us as human beings. Now, I didn't have a clue. I thought I drank because I wanted to drink. I didn't know that alcohol controlled every area of my life. Alcohol controlled where I would live, where I would work, the people I would run with, and eventually the people I would run from. I thought I drank because I wanted to drink. 82 miles, that's as far north as alcohol let me go. I got a job in my profession, and I rose very quickly to the top, and that too almost killed me in Alcoholics Anonymous because I told you I was too successful to be an alcoholic. I told you about the trophies and the plaques. I told you about the big oak desk I sat behind. What I didn't tell you about, I was in the newspaper business, and what I didn't tell you about was the times that I would come to behind a podium in a room full of people holding an award, not knowing if I was giving it or receiving it. And so I would say thank you, and I would go sit down, and then somebody would elbow me and tell me I was presenting it to the Kiwanis Club, and I'd have to get up and start over again. And And I didn't tell you about that. I just told you about the trophies and the plaques. And that I was way too successful to be an alcoholic. And I don't know if any of you know about the newspaper business. Oh, I'm shedding up here now. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the newspaper business, but if you're in that business, you have to drink. Now I know, but if I had had my choice, I would have chosen to have a husband, 2.5 children, a little house in the suburbs, a little 8-hour job. I would have gone to my little 8-hour job every day, gone home after work, had made dinner for the husband and kids, had dinner, listened to their days, watched a little television, read the children a story, sent them to bed, spent quality time with my husband, get up the next morning and do it over again. I'm sure that would have been, but that wasn't my karma. That wasn't in the cards for me. I was in the newspaper business, and we worked 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And every day after work, you had to go to the bar. Because that's where the news was. That's where the stories happened. That's where the leads came from. And I know I did get a lot of leads, and the problem was I wrote the notes on those stupid little napkins, and the glass sweats, and the ink runs, and in the morning you look at it and you can't read it, and you think, oh my God, I've got to go back there again tonight. And you have to do it. You see, I don't know I have a disease that manifests itself in justification, rationalization, and denial. I don't know that. What I know is I have to work 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and then I have to go to the bar. And I broke a really big story one of our school board guys, married man, 6 kids, was having an affair. 25 years ago, that was big news. It's almost mandatory now, but that was big news then. And it was a big scandal, and I broke the story. Never once in that time did it ever occur to me that I was the woman he was having an affair with. That never went through here, but so I did get some stories and some leads from those places, and I was way too successful to be an alcoholic. I was driving home one night. I always had bad car karma. I don't know what it was about cars. I always picked the lemon. I always picked the car that fell apart. Fenders fell off. Big dents appeared mysteriously in them. I mean, they'd crumble. And one night I'm driving. I'd been at work. I'd been at the bar, and I'm driving home, and I'm thinking, because you always have to think. And I'm thinking while I'm driving home. And as I turned left onto my street, the power steering went out of my car. And as the power steering went out, I slammed into a car on the left-hand side of the street. Well, I panicked, and I turned the wheel just a little to the right, and I slammed into a car on the right. And I turned the wheel a little to the left, and I slammed into a car on the left, and I slammed into one on the right, and I slammed into one on the right, and I finally pulled into my driveway, and I just sat there in a moment of gratitude. I was so relieved to have gotten home safely. I just sat there for a moment, and I got out of the car, and I went into the house, and I was only in the house a couple minutes, and the doorbell rang. It's 20 after 2 in the morning. Who is visiting me now? They never leave you alone. Somebody always wants something. They don't get... What is it? And I throw open the door, and it's the Orange County Sheriff. What do you want? Do you know what time it is? And he wanted me to come out on the front yard. So I go out to the front yard, and I start telling him about my car. He's not interested in my car. He's pointing to all these cars that are smashed out on the street on the way to my house. And I looked at him and said, and isn't it grand that I got home safely? And he opened the back door of his car. No, I've been on ride-alongs. I don't have time to go on a ride-along. I have a big day tomorrow. I've got to get some sleep. And he pushed me into the car. And I have a reputation as a violent drunk, only I don't know it. I don't know I have a reputation as a violent drunk, but when you get out of the car the way I get out of the car, you get a reputation as a violent drunk. And he put me in the car, and he shackled my ankles. And he cuffed my hands behind my back. And in Orange County, California, our sheriffs have a fence between them and the back seat. I'm not sure what that's there for, but there's a fence there. And he starts taking me for a ride, and I don't have time. And I'm telling him, I don't have time. You have to take me home. I've done this before. I've been on the ride-along. I need to go home. Where are you taking me? And I don't know how many of you have ridden along with them, but they don't usually chat with you when you're in the back seat. And I'm not quacking away at him, and he's driving. And I'm quacking away, and he's driving, and the devil flew in me. And I don't know if the devil ever flew in you, but the devil flew in me that night, and I just honked up a big one, and I just spit right on the back of his head. He didn't think it was very funny. He sped up. Now he's in a hurry to get me to wherever we're going. And he's going faster and faster and faster. When that speedometer hit 100 miles an hour, he slammed on the brake. And I'm shackled and I'm cuffed and I can't break the fall, and I went face forward into that metal grate. And my glasses broke and there was blood everywhere and it was a mess. And I'll never forget it that night, though. They were taking my mug shot and they kept referring to me as Waffle Face because I had the grate all across my face. And it went that way day after day after day after day. I don't know it's alcoholism. I think it's bad luck. It's the cops. It's circumstances and conditions. It's a lot of things. Never occurs to me it has to do with alcohol. I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous as a result of my 12th drunk driving assault charge. I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but when I drank, they didn't get their underwear in such a knot about drunk driving in California. They're really testy about it now, but they didn't get that upset. I mean, you'd pay an attorney $1,000, which was a lot of money, but you'd pay an attorney $1,000. He'd go to court, do whatever he did, give you a call, send you a letter, tell you what the deal was, and that was the end of it. It was never a big deal. One time it was kind of a big deal. I had two pending at the same time. My attorney was nervous. I think if your attorney is nervous, you ought to worry about it, so I worried about it. I'm sitting in a bar worrying about it one night and struck up a conversation with this guy sitting next to me, and as luck would have it, he worked for a mortuary. And I came up with a plan, and alcoholics, we come up with really good plans really quickly. And we went over the mortuary. We've got a death certificate. We forged my name on it. We filled out all the information. We forged a doctor's signature, and we sent it to the judge. Because the judge can't expect you to show up if you're dead. I called my attorney. I told him he didn't have to worry anymore. And he didn't worry. Nobody worried about it for about a month or so, and then I got stopped for drunk driving assault again. And I'll never forget at that time the judge wanted to see me. Now, why does he never wanted to see me before? Why does he want to see me? I went. He looked at me and he said, "Miss Ochoa, tell me, how is it a dead person is standing in my court?" Shrugged my shoulders. I said, "I don't know, bad luck." And that's what I thought it was. It was bad luck. Circumstances and conditions, the cops, you, they, them. Pressure at work, my boss. It was a lot of things. Never once occurred to me it had anything to do with drinking alcohol. Never occurred to me. But on my last drunk driving assault, they were getting a little upset about people drinking and driving automobiles. And because of my past record, I was being sentenced to 10 years in prison. I've been to jail. I know how to do jail. There's more alcohol and other drugs inside the institution than there are some days on the street. You just have to know what to do, who to do it to, and be willing to go to any lengths, and I always was. And I was 26 years old standing in court that morning, and in the middle of and I was drunk. It's the only way I went to court. It's the only way I went to work, the laundromat. It's the only way I did anything. Standing there drunk that morning, being sentenced. In the middle of sentencing me, the expression on the judge's face changed. The tone of his voice got different, and he looked at me and he said, "I know this won't work for you, but I'm going to offer you one more chance," and he offered me an alternative. And part of that alternative was meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I wish I could tell you I left the courtroom, I came here, looked at the 12 steps of recovery, knew there was a solution to the problems in my life, worked them all in the first week, and skyrocketed to recovery. And if James wasn't here, that's a story I would tell you, but but that's not my story. I drank for 3 more months. In retrospect, I can tell you that I drank with a sense of urgency and a desperation that I had never known. I didn't drink a greater quantity. Physically, it would have been impossible to drink a greater quantity of alcohol, but I drank with a sense of urgency and a desperation that I had never known. And on October 4th, 1975, the day before I was to go back to court to tell the judge what it was I was doing with the alternative he gave me, on that day I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a Sunday night, and it was a speaker meeting, and it was about this size. And I can't tell you who talked that night, but I heard 2 things. I heard, "We don't drink between meetings." I quickly looked around and I didn't see any of you drinking during the meeting. And I thought, if you're not drinking in the meeting and you don't drink between the meetings, when do you drink? This made me really nervous, and I could not figure out why the judge sent me to a place where people didn't drink. I would have understood if he sent me to the Sears School of Safe Driving. I did not understand why he sent me to a place where people didn't drink. And the other thing I heard was that the answers were in that book, Alcoholics Anonymous. So after the meeting, I stole the book. I mean, God knows I need to have the answers. I can't tell you how irritated I was when I got home. Not only could I not find the answers in that silly book, I couldn't even find the questions. And I thought, oh, dear God, God, I've stolen the wrong book, and I'm going to have to go back and get the right one, and I'm a thief. It's humiliating for a thief to have stolen the wrong book. But I came back to alcohol. I used to teach school. Whenever I talk in San Diego, I make amends to anybody who might be illiterate. You know what? I like to talk, and I like to write on the blackboard. These are not good qualities for a school teacher, but it was all I had going for me. I don't like children, but I needed to put myself through school. So I taught. And there are about 35 late 20-year-olds in San Diego who cannot read as a result of having me for a second grade teacher, and I always try to make amends to them. But having had that experience teaching, I know about the answer book. And I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous to get the answer book. I don't think it matters what brings you back. I think what's important is that you come back. I came back to get the answer book Wednesday with 4 days of sobriety. I went to my second meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was a discussion meeting. And in that meeting I heard, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it. And I looked around the room, and I looked around the room, and I looked around the room, and I could not figure out what it was you had that was so hot that I should be willing to go any length to get it. I mean, look at the person next to you. Unless you're sleeping with them, what is it? Some of you had nice jewelry. If you stood next to me during the Lord's Prayer, if your rings were loose, they were mine. Some of you have nice cars. I have a record as a car thief. Of course, I don't know I'm a car thief. I have to wait a while for my sponsor to tell me. I mean, I'm in a bar drinking. Bar closes. I need to go home. I find some keys. I go find the car that they fit, and I'm driving myself home. My sponsor and the San Diego police think this is grand theft auto. I think it's alternative transportation. I mean, I just need to get home. But I know some of you had nice spouses. We all know how to get those. We don't keep them well, but we know how to get them. And then I saw him. And I truly believe there's a him for each of us. This guy was a skinny little fellow. He was bald-headed. He wore baggy pants. I don't know if you do it here in Mississippi, but in California, the teenagers wear pants so baggy they could put a homeless family in their pants with them. I don't get it. I don't understand it, but his weren't quite that baggy, but they were baggy. He had tennis shoes on with no shoelaces, and the holes were there where they should have been, and he nodded out. And I figured he was shooting heroin. I mean, folks who shoot heroin nod out. And I can do this thing and not drink if I can shoot a little heroin. So I found out where he worked, and the next day I snuck down to his office. I said, Dick, I have to do this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous to stay out of jail, and I don't know how to do it. And he told me if I would go to meetings and read the book and talk to other alcoholics and not drink, he said, I'll guarantee you won't get drunk. And if you don't get drunk, your life will get different. And I'm grateful he told it to me that way. He didn't tell me my life would get better. He didn't tell me my job life would get better, my finances would get better, my relationships would get better, my family life would get better, my sex life would get better. He didn't tell me any of it would get better, and I'm grateful, because none of it has. So, it's a little hope for the newcomer. But it's all gotten different. And as I stand here tonight, I can tell you from the top of my head to the tip of my toes, I have never had it so good. See, all I came here for was to stay out of jail. That's all I wanted out of this deal. If I'd have had it my way, I'd have shortchanged myself. See, I don't know good from bad for me. I'm going through something I think is good for me, and it generally turns out to be bad for me. And I'm going through something I think is bad for me, and it generally turns out to be good for me. And I don't know good from bad for me. I've gone through times in my recovery where my entire life has fallen apart. I've gone through times sober. I've lost jobs. I've lost relationships. I've lost big piles of money. It seems to me that everything I worked for had been ripped away from me. And I have believed in those times that God had sort of been done with me, taken off to 10 to 1 of you and left me. But I didn't drink, and I didn't die, and I didn't drink, and I didn't die. And I got far enough beyond it to, in retrospect, be able to look back and see that every time I have thought my life was falling apart, what was really happening, it was falling together. And it had to be exactly that way for God to move me to where He'd have me be. So I don't know good from bad for me, but I know different. And every area of my life is different than it was the day I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have never had it so good. If I'd have had it my way, I'd have shortchanged myself. If a single day in the last 22 years I'd have had it my way, I'd have shortchanged myself. I hear people in Alcoholics Anonymous saying, I deserve. I know what I deserve. I deserve 2 days in the electric chair. That's what I deserve. There's a God who has more in store for me than I could ever, beyond my wildest imagination. A loving, gentle God who has an infinite kingdom for me. All I have to do is not drink, show up, and live life. Left to my own devices, I'll shortchange myself. And I believe that old man. I don't know why I believed him. I hadn't believed a human being in a long time, but I believed him. That old man who I thought was shooting heroin, as it turns out, had been sober longer than I'd been alive. And the reason he nodded, he had something inside that I didn't have a clue as to what it was. He had a rightness inside. He had a peace. He had a serenity. As a result of these steps, he was right with us and right with himself and right with God, and I didn't have a clue as to what that was. I went home and I already had the book, so every night I'd open it to chapter 3 and I'd read the line that says, most of us are unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. I'd say amen and close the book, and that was reading the book. My court program said I had to go to 2 meetings a week. I thought that was really obsessive, but I was willing to go to any length to stay out of jail. So I went to the 2 meetings a week my court program said I had to go to. I go down to the Canyon Club in Laguna Beach where they have AA meetings. I'd have a cup of coffee. On the way out, I'd say hi, Jim, to the manager. He'd say hi, Patti, and that was talking to another alcoholic. And the only thing I did right is I didn't drink. And I didn't drink, and I didn't drink, and I didn't drink. And I was not a charming newcomer. I was not happy, joyous, and free. I did not walk in and know I was home. I've heard people in AA say, you loved me until I could love myself. I believe that for you. In my case, you tolerated me, and I'm grateful for it. I would be in the back of a room, and the speaker would be talking. I would get irritated with what they said. I would leap up from the back of the room. I would yell something to them. It was never constructive. I would yell something to them. What it was profanities, but I stuck them together. It sounded like a sentence. I would just scream it out from the back of the room. And somebody, usually a little blue-haired lady, would turn around and smile and say, keep coming back. And I'd flip her off, wave my court card in her face, tell her I didn't have a choice, and sit back down until I had to leap up again. And I carried a big knife in my boot. I would pull it out of my boot. I wanted somebody to react. If you would go, then I would just clean my fingernails and put it back in my boot. If nobody reacted, I would throw it across the room at the literature table. I always aimed for the piece of literature, A Member's Eye View. I didn't always hit that, but that's what I aimed for. What guy was sharing one night, he irritated me. He wasn't saying anything to me, just shared. I took it personally. After the meeting, I jumped him. I was beating his head into the concrete floor. It took 6 guys to get me off of him, and when they did, I knew they were going to tell me I couldn't come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. One of those men looked at me and he said, Patti, next time you feel that volcano about to explode, he said, just put your hands in your pockets and don't touch another human being. And I wondered how he knew about the volcano. Nobody had ever talked to me about the volcano before, but that's what I had inside of me. I had a volcano, and when it went off, I had to do something. When it went off, I wanted to see blood, preferably yours. And when it went off, I didn't seem to have a choice. And Alex told me to put my hands in my pockets and not to touch another human being. And I had to walk around for a long time with my hands in my pockets to discover that anger was a cover for a tremendous amount of fear. I was absolutely scared to death. I was afraid of you. I was afraid of the law. I was afraid of me. And I couldn't survive in places where I'd survived with fear. So I'd begun as a small child to cover the fear with anger. And I acted it out in violence. And that's how I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. One night I heard the traditions read. I guess they were read at every meeting. I never heard them, but I've heard them at every meeting since. And tradition 3, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. I leapt out of my chair. I was so excited. I said, that's it. I don't have a desire to stop drinking. I can't stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. And on the way out, I kept trying to get thrown out. It never occurred to me just to leave and don't come back. Never occurred to me. But on the way out that night, an old-timer grabbed me, and thank God for the old-timers. And this guy grabbed me and he said, Patti, he said, there's a judge in South Orange County Court. He has a desire for you to stop drinking. And in your case, we're going to let that be enough. I stayed on somebody else's desire. I don't think it matters whose desire you're here on. I don't think it matters what your motive is. I don't think it matters what your intentions are. I think what's critical is you don't take a drink. And I didn't take a drink, and I didn't take a drink, and I didn't take a drink. And 8.5 months away from my last drink, I pray God happens to everybody who it hasn't happened to that happened to me. 8.5 months away from my last drink. The pain of not drinking and not recovering is the greatest pain I have ever experienced. The pain of not drinking and not recovering at 8.5 months drove me to my knees. And 8.5 months away from my last drink, I saw the evidence of my alcoholism. You all saw it when I walked in. It was piled this high. But you gave me the dignity to do what I had to do for as long as I had to do it, until I got far enough away from my last drink to see the evidence. And at 8.5 months sober, on my knees, I took the first step of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. I realized I was powerless. When I ingest alcohol, I'm damned to continue to live the same way, day after day after day. When I drink alcohol, I have no choices. Whenever I get into the ring with alcohol, I lose. Whether I'm fighting it because I'm drinking it or I'm fighting it because you're drinking it. Whenever I get into the ring with alcohol, I lose. And my life had become unmanageable. I had a lot of successes in my life, but they were all fueled by alcohol. And I had a lot of failures, and they were all fueled by alcohol. Alcohol controlled every area of my life. I was powerless. I was damned to continue to live that way, and my life was unmanageable. Alcohol controlled every area of my life. And that was the first step for me. And I want to talk about the steps because for me, that's what happened. There is no way to get from where I was on October 4th, 1975 to where I am tonight, except through the power and the magic of the 12 steps of recovery. And this is just my experience. And if you have a different experience, talk to your sponsor. Step 2 for me, I think all the time. Every once in a while I hear us tell a newcomer, don't think. I don't know how you do that. I think all the time. I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about something else. I'm thinking about something else right now while I'm talking to you, as a matter of fact. And then I start thinking I shouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking. Then I start thinking how not to think what I'm thinking while I'm thinking what I'm thinking, that I shouldn't be thinking while I'm thinking what I'm thinking that I'm thinking. You know what I'm grateful for? I'm grateful I don't have a loudspeaker on my head so that everything I thought came barreling out. I mean, that would be truly humiliating, but I don't know how not to think. I was raised Catholic. I'm recovering from that. I have stayed sober long enough to know it wasn't the Catholic Church. I have a hearing problem. I have always had a hearing problem. It's not what you say, it's how I hear it. But what I heard the nun say is I heard the nun say I was going to burn for just as long for thinking it as I was for doing it. And I've always been a kind of into action person. So I figure if I'm going to burn from thinking it, I'm going to get some enjoyment out of doing it. So everything I thought I did. I did some things I didn't even want to do. I did some things I knew ahead of time were incredibly disgusting, but I had the thought, so I took the action. And what I came to believe in step 2 was the day would come that I could have a thought and I would not have to take an action on it. I'm a loner by nature. You know you're a loner if you don't like AA potlucks. I mean, that's... Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't change your nature, but what it does is it gives me the courage and strength to do the things I need to do in spite of my nature. But I'm alone. Left to my own devices, I prefer to sit on my couch. I like to fish. Well, I like to throw and reel. I don't like to catch because then you have to touch the fish. But I like to fish because you do that. I like to read. I like to do things that you do alone because I don't have any social skills. I have one social skill. I used it really early this morning. I'm fresh out. I have no... And if you're alone, and being a loner, the power greater than myself in step 2, for me, was not God. Now, I don't have a problem. Well, I do. I have one problem with God. I believe we are all God's children, and I've always wanted to be an only child. That's the only problem I have with God. But other than that, I have no problem with God. But for me, the power greater than myself was not God. Because being a loner, if I had come to believe that God was going to restore me to sanity, I'd have sat on my couch. God would have flown over, sprinkled me with sanity, and then taken off to wherever it is God hangs out, and that would have been the end of it. I would be sitting on my couch tonight, right now, watching Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and somebody else would be here. So for me, the power greater than myself was the action of steps 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I came to believe that through taking the action of the steps, I would be restored to right thinking. You see, I've always tried to think my way into right living. That has never worked for me. As a result of the steps, I have been able to act my way into right thinking. And in step 10, it says, by this time, sanity will have been restored. Through taking the action of the steps, I have been restored to sanity. Does not mean that I don't still think. What it means is I don't have to take an action on every thought that I have. I'm an alcoholic. Every once in a while I have a thought that a drink would be nice. I have that thought, I clap, I say thank you for your participation, I just go about whatever it is that I'm doing. I don't have to take the drink, and I don't have to run the tape that says you're a lousy member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're really no damn good. If you were working a good program, you wouldn't even think this quack, 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 quack. I don't have to beat myself up for having the thought, and I don't have to take an action on it. And for me, that's what step 2 said. Step 3, I hear people talk about having trouble with step 3, and it's like, well, every day I get up and I turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Well, I turn my will and my life over to the care of God, but by about noon I take it back. Well, I'm working on step 3. I'm turning my will and my life over to the care of God, except for my sex and finances, because I don't want to be poor and celibate. And pretty much I figure they haven't really read the step, those folks, because I go to work every day, and I'm driving to work, and I get to the same intersection every day, and every day as I'm coming to the intersection, I think, okay, now I have to make a decision, turn right or left or go straight. To get to my job, I got to turn right, so I make a decision to turn right, and I go straight to the intersection. Hey, dang. So I make a U-turn. I'm coming back to the intersection. Now I have to make a decision, turn right, turn left, or go straight. Now to get to my job, I got to turn left. I make a decision to turn left, and I go straight to the intersection. Darn it. I make another U-turn. I'm coming back to the intersection. I make a decision, turn right, turn left, or go straight. I got to turn right. I make a decision to turn right, and I go straight to the intersection. Sort of get where we're going here. I make another U-turn, make a decision, turn left, and I do this with the steering wheel. And the book says it. It says, although our decision was vital, it had very little permanent effect unless immediately followed by action. The decision I make every day at that intersection has no impact. What has an impact is that I take an action and turn the steering wheel. If I never took an action, I'd still be making U-turns up and down Chapman Avenue in Orange. 6 years worth of U-turns up and down Chapman Avenue in Orange. I got to take an action, and step 3 says made a decision. The action for me was step 4. I did my inventory the way the book says to do it. I made the little columns. I didn't recover this quickly either, by the way, just to let you know. I mean, I never did any of the steps, so my back was against the wall. The pain was so great it was due to die, and I had no other choice. Under those circumstances, I became willing to work the next one of the 12 steps. But I did my inventory. I made the little columns. I wrote down everybody who I resented, which basically turned out to be everybody who breathed air that I thought should have been mine. They ended up on the list. And in the second column, what they did to me, well, I wanted to tell you all my life what they did to me. I was having a really good time. I was sorry I waited this long. I was really having fun. In the third column, how it affected me. Well, it affected my security, my self-worth, well, no wonder I drank. If all these people did all these things to you, you'd have drank too. And I was really having fun. Now, in my zealousness, I accidentally turned the page of the big book. And after the diagram, hidden in the body of the text, it says, referring to our list again, we put out of our minds the wrongs others had done. Well, now it wasn't any fun anymore. Now I had to look at my part. But I did that. I did that with my resentments, my fears, and my relationships. And for the first time, I saw who Patti was. See, I spent my whole life putting on a show, only I didn't know it. My whole life was a show. And I remember a picnic that we had. My father's a drunk. My mother's a major untreated Al-Anon, a controller. I think if you're going to have an untreated Al-Anon, you ought to have an enabler. I think they're a lot more fun. But my mother was a controller, and there were 6 kids in the family. And we went on this picnic one day, and my mother put the blanket of food out. And the minute the food was out, my father, the drunk, passed out diagonally across the picnic, on top of all the food, which was sort of the cue for the kids to go nuts. We started grabbing bologna out from underneath them, and we're slinging at each other, and handfuls of potato salad. We're having this major food fight, and my mother's trying to get us, and my mother's a bitty little thing, and she's trying to get us all back into control, and we're not having it. We're nuts. And then my mother spots this family across the park, and they're having this nice little picnic. They're all eating like little ladies and gentlemen. They're playing Frisbee with the dog, and my mother gets an idea. And I think for an untreated Al-Anon, an idea is as deadly as a drink for an alcoholic. Because my mother thinks, why can't we have a family picnic like that? Why can't we have a family like them? So my mother spends the whole week putting the fear of God in us. She buys a new wicker picnic basket, Melmac, and I know some of you know Melmac, plates and cups, matching. We take the dog, who hasn't been out of the backyard in 10 years. The dog goes. She sets up the little picnic. She props my father, the drunk, against a tree so that when he passes out, he just backs up to the tree. We tried playing Frisbee with the dog. The dog didn't have a clue as to what to do. But I often think about that day, and I wonder, what if that day there was a family on the other side of the park pointing to us, saying, why can't we have a family like that? You see, and that's how I spent my whole life. I spent my whole life like that family, putting on a show for you. I didn't have a clue as to who I was. When I did my fourth step for the first time, I saw who I was. I looked at the fifth step and thought it was very nice. I thought it was for those of you who weren't Catholic. Those of us who are Catholic, we know about confession. We know it doesn't work. I thought the rest of you needed to have that experience. I put the fourth step in the trunk of my car because I didn't want anybody to find it. And then I drove around with a continual sense of impending doom. And of course, the fear was as I'd be rear-ended on the freeway, my trunk would fly open, my fourth step would be everywhere. And I'm very anal. I had written my first and last name on every page of that fourth step. But rather than do a fifth step, I just drove around that way for a long time. And then one night I was in Los Angeles visiting a friend of mine, and we were talking. As we were talking, I realized I was doing a fifth step, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And I went to the car and I got my fourth step. And my whole life, and this is just my perception, my whole life I think people hurt me. I think people disappointed me. I think people let me down. As a small child, I just didn't want to be hurt anymore. As a small child, I made a decision that I didn't want you to hurt me, and I started building a wall between me and you. And as a small child, I began building a wall, and by the time I got to you, I had a big brick wall between me and you. You couldn't love me because I couldn't let you in to love me. That wall kept you out. What I never knew about that wall is it made me a prisoner inside. I lived behind that wall in isolation and loneliness, and I didn't have a clue, but the wall kept you out. When I did my fifth step that night, that wall did not crumble down. When I did my fifth step, one brick came out of that wall. And every time I've shared with another alcoholic, another brick has come out of that wall. Until tonight when I have no brick wall between me and you. Well, I have a little styrofoam thing I throw up every once in a while because sometimes I get afraid. You know, I hear people in Alcoholics Anonymous say if there's faith, there can be no fear. I think that's poop. I have a tremendous amount of faith, but I'm a human being. And as a human being, I sometimes have fear. You know, I thought if I worked these steps hard enough, with enough passion, with enough zealousness, if I really worked the steps, I would somehow skyrocket above human. What's happened in working the steps is I've come into my humanness. And as a human being, I have fear. I have times that I feel insecure. I have moments of self-doubt. I have human feelings. The difference is, because I'm with you, I don't need to stop and have a drink when I have that feeling. Because I'm with you, I take your hand and you walk with me. But sometimes you're not there, so I throw this little styrofoam wall up. And then one of you walks up and one poof and the wall comes down, you take my hand and you walk with me. But I have those feelings. It's part of being human is I have those feelings. The good news is I have no brick wall between me and you. There is no brick wall between me and you. Today I can let you love me and I can love you. And what I know today is that when people love you, sometimes you get hurt. And what I know today is that if I get hurt, it's not going to kill me. What I know today is if I get hurt, I don't have to stop and have a drink in order to take care of that hurt. I know today that if I get hurt, all I need to do is take your hand and walk with you, and that you'll walk with me through it. And I didn't know that before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 6 and 7 for me is the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. We tell people don't leave before the miracle happens, and then we don't tell them what the miracle is. For me, the miracle is step 6 and 7. I went home from doing my fifth step. I just accidentally took the book down and by coincidence opened it to the part about step 6 and 7. And in the big book, it's not much written about it, but it is kind of poetic. And as I was reading it, I sort of got lulled into it. And when I became aware of what I was reading, I was in the middle of the 7-step prayer. And when I became aware of what I was reading, that prayer took the longest journey anything has ever taken, the journey from my head to my heart. And I finished reading that prayer, and I knew that I believed it. And when I finished reading the prayer, what it said in the book happened to me. I walked through the archway to freedom. I walked away from the person I have been all of my life to start to become the person God intended for me to be. And the best I've ever described myself, when I came here, I was an animal with latent human tendencies. That's what walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because the steps work, because you've been willing to share with me, I've become very kind, very loving, very nurturing, very caring. Of course, now they're telling me it's codependency and I have to recover from it, but I love the person who I am. I'm tempted to write a book, Women Who Love Themselves Too Much. I love the person who I am, and for me, that's the miracle. And I think too many people do leave before they give themselves that chance. I think too many people do leave Alcoholics Anonymous before they give themselves the opportunity to start to become the person God intended for them to be. And I need you to know that my character defects did not get zapped away. They're not free floating around in the universe. You do not need to worry about any of them falling on you. My character defects are in a little red wagon that I keep with me. I pull it around with me all the time. Those defects were my survival tools. They're the tools that allowed me to live long enough to get to you. And so I pull them around with me in a little red wagon. And sometimes when I get too afraid or too insecure or I feel too alone and you're not there, I pick up one of those defects and I use it. The difference is today when I don't like the way it feels, not when you don't like the way it looks, but when I don't like the way it feels, all I need to do is ask God to remove it, and He'll take it, and He'll put it back into my wagon. I don't have to beat myself up, and I don't have to stop and have a drink, because if I drink, I'm damned to continue to live with that defect day after day after day. If I don't take a drink, I can ask God to remove it, and I have a choice. If I take a drink, I have no choices. If I don't take a drink, I have a choice. Step 8 and 9 for me are conventional ways of getting rid of conventional guilt. I felt guilty because I was guilty. I did a lot of things to a lot of people for one more drink. I walked over a lot of people. I gave up a lot of stuff. The only thing I've ever wanted to do since I was in the 4th grade was be a writer. And I gave it up for one more drink. I have given it all up for one more drink. I felt guilty because I was guilty. I had a sponsor nagging at me. I'm sure none of you have this problem. Certainly the women I sponsor don't have this problem. But I had a sponsor nagging at me. She was like really concerned with my unfinished business. And I had a lot of unfinished. I'm a really good starter. I kind of poop out, but I start really big. And she got really concerned with all this unfinished business. And one of her biggest concerns was I had taken classes for a master's degree, but I hadn't finished it because I had to take oral exams and I just didn't do it. And she was like harping at me to finish this thing. I don't want to finish it. I've drank myself out of the profession. It's not going to do me any good. I'm going to have to take classes. I'm blah, 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 blah. And she's nagging. To shut her up, which is the main reason I do anything, I said, all right, I'll do it. I'm not going to like it. And blah, blah, blah. Call San Diego State to find out what I'm going to have to do because it's been forever. Call them up to find out. This blonde bimbat, I'm sure, puts me on hold and comes back and says, Miss Ochoa, our records indicate that you have a master's degree. I said, no, you don't understand. I never finished it. I got this nag harping at me. I got to, so I don't even want it, but now I'm obsessed with it. I spent forever. Finally got a hold of the guy that was the head of my master's committee. I explained it to him. He said, Patti, you have a master's degree. I said, Jack, I had to take 2-day oral exams. He said, you did. I said, how was I? He said, you were brilliant. Of course, I called my sponsor, told her how she had humiliated me one more time. I have friends want me to call around. They're certain I have a doctorate somewhere, but but I did all of that. I did all of that work. And for me, the amends were not just saying sorry. The amends for me were work. I had to live my life differently. I had to do stuff. I couldn't just say sorry. I always thought my family was dysfunctional. They were fine. They are fine. I was the dysfunction. I didn't know how to be a daughter. I didn't know how to be a sister. I was the dysfunction. I had to live my life differently. I couldn't just go tell them sorry. I had to be a daughter. I didn't know how to do it. You taught me how to be a daughter. You taught me how to be a sister. My mother lived in a different town. I would go to my mother's on Sunday. Sometimes I could stay 15 minutes. Sometimes I could stay 20 minutes. And then I couldn't stand it anymore, and I would drive home, and I would call you up, and I would be blah, 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 blah. And you would tell me something else, and you would share some other experience, and you would say, well, you did it this way. And the next Sunday I would go, and maybe I'd stay 25 minutes or 30 minutes. I couldn't stand anymore. I'd come back. I would whine. I would cry. You would share with me. 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 Every Sunday for 15 years, I went to my mother's house, and I practiced being a daughter. And I practiced being a sister, and eventually I practiced being an aunt because you shared with me how to do it. And it took me that long of living my life differently to get right with my family, till I felt like I was right with my family. And I became a part of my family, and I'm right in the middle of all of their insanity, and I love it. And a year ago, October, I was out of town on business, and I landed back in town. I have this really cool pager. I used to wear my garage door opener so I looked important, but now I have a really cool pager that you can read. And I just landed in town, and my pager went off, and I read it, and it said, call your brother. And And when I read it, I knew. And I called my brother, and my mother had passed away about the time that I landed. And because you had shared with me how to be a daughter, because you had shared with me how to do it week after week, day after day, month after month, year after year, because you had shared your experience with me, I had gotten right with my mother. And so when I got the message that my mother had died, I didn't have any of that remorse. I didn't have any of that, why couldn't she wait one more day? Why did she have to die now? I just wanted to tell her one more thing. Why couldn't I didn't have any of that. I had grief. Grief is part of being human. But I didn't have any of that remorse because you had shared with me and you had allowed me to get right with my mother. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous for that. I just came here to stay out of jail. And if I'd have had it my way, I'd have shortchanged myself. 10, 11, and 12 for me are the recovery steps. They're the steps that allow me to continue to recover in Alcoholics Anonymous. 10 says the process is powerful. Keep using it. Keep writing about it, talking about it. Ask God to remove the defect. Make amends when necessary, and then turn your attention to somebody you can help. What is it I can do for you? How can I be of service? It seems to me that when I'm focused on my stuff, when I'm trying to fix my stuff, when I'm holding on to my stuff, when I'm working on... I am so glad we had character defects when I got sober. Now there's issues, and they're very confusing, but when I'm like dealing with it, working on it, God can't do a dang thing with it. When I let go of it and turn my attention to you, and what is it I can do for you, and how can I be of service, God takes care of my stuff. The process is powerful. Keep using it. Step 11, my prayer in the morning is very simply, thy will be done. I'm so naive. I truly believe the rest of the day is God's business. My prayer at night is a little scarier. My prayer at night is, dear God, please have people treat me tomorrow exactly the way I treated people today. And when I know I'm going to say that prayer tonight, it will hold me in good stead. It keeps you from racing down the freeway, flipping off people and cutting them off. Keeps me from doing some of the things that I think would be wonderful ideas. It helps with restraint of pen and tongue. Dear God, please have people treat me tomorrow exactly the way that I treated people today. And step 12 is the greatest gift you've ever given me. The opportunity to take a little of my past, the opportunity to take a little bit of the despair, the demoralization, the degradation of the female alcoholic, a little bit of the dark, seedy side of us all, and give it as the greatest gift to another human being. To be able to look into the eye of another alcoholic, saying, honey, you don't have to live that way anymore. Take my hand, come with me, sit in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to live that way anymore, day at a time. I look at 10, 11, and 12 like going to the department store. I go to the May Company. I go in on the first floor, but I want to go to the second floor, and I'm lazy. I'm really lazy, so I go to the escalator. I always go to the escalator that's coming down. You can get from the first floor to the second floor on the down escalator, but you got to keep moving. And 10, 11, and 12 keep me moving up the down escalator. If I stop using them, I don't hit bottom right away, but I start going down. And if I don't start using them pretty quick, I'm right back to where I was when I started. So they keep me moving up the down escalator. The process is powerful. Keep using it. I have a son as a direct result of my alcoholism. I never wanted to be a mother. I know that's not adequate birth control, but my son was raised in Alcoholics Anonymous. He taught him everything he knows. He taught him how to love because I couldn't. He taught him how to be kind. He taught him how to be generous. He taught him how to be caring. He also taught him how to kind of manipulate. I guess you have to take the good with the bad. And he was raised here with you. And just before he was 18 years old, people were telling me he was smoking dope. Whenever I get into the ring with alcohol, I lose. Whenever I do battle with drugs, I lose. I have a disease that manifests itself in justification, rationalization, and denial. I'm a single parent. I've always been a single parent. And I couldn't accept it. His grades are dropping, the teachers told me. And I said, he's probably one of those kids. Education's not important. And when he's in his early 20s, it'll be important. He'll do well. He was changing friends. They were pointing that out to me. Oh, well, you know, those other kids are a bunch of squares, but my roommate found a bag of dope in his bedroom. Out of my mouth comes, that probably belongs to a friend of his. Rationalization, justification, denial. I'm in the ring and I'm going to lose. I'm getting beat up and I don't even know it. I'm almost 17 years sober and I'm fighting the disease and I'm getting beat up. Just before his 18th birthday came in, the bags under his eyes are like down to his knees. I stood up, and God will do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. God won't do for me what I can do for myself. God won't send me money in the mail because I'm able to go to work, but God will do for me what I can't do for myself. I stood up that night and I would have never said these words to my son, but out of my mouth came the question, "Are you loaded?" I would have never asked my son that. He didn't miss a heartbeat. He said, "No, I'm just tired." He had heard me make excuses day after day after day after day. "No, I'm just tired." I said, "Patrick, if you're tired, you need to come home earlier and you need to make a choice. You can either smoke dope or you can live in my house, but you can't do both." I would have never said that to my son. God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. My son went in his room, and a few minutes later he came back with a backpack thrown over his shoulder, and he'd made a choice. Intellectually, I understand that choice. I made that choice day after day after day after day. I've given it all up for one more drink. Intellectually, I understand the choice. But when your child makes it, for me, it was one of the greatest pains I've ever experienced. As my son made the choice and walked out the door, and I was in pain that I had never experienced up until then. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, and I didn't know what to do. And everything I had learned left my head, I suppose, and I sat on my couch in pain that I can't even describe to you. And I didn't know if I should drink or kill myself. I couldn't figure it out, so I sat on my couch. The decision has no effect unless followed by action. I just sat on my couch. A couple days went by of me sitting on my couch. I didn't know what to do. In pain that I can't describe, and then the telephone rang, and it was the woman I sponsor. And I don't know about the women you sponsor, but mine never start out with "How are you?" She started out talking about him and what he's doing, and quack, 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 yak, yak, and and she finally took a breath, and I said, "Hey, listen, I'll meet you at the club for the noon meeting. We'll go to the meeting, and then we'll talk about it after the meeting." I hung up the phone. God did for me what I couldn't do for myself. I got off my couch, and I met her at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we sat through that meeting, and then I paid attention to what she had to say to me, and I shared something back with her, and it didn't relieve the pain. It didn't take the pain away, but it lessened it just a little bit. And I took one more right action, one more right action, one more right action. What can I do for you? How can I be of service? And God took care of my stuff. Several years went by, and well, not a whole lot. He's only 23 now, but a few years went by, and he never moved back home. He did live in his van in my driveway for a while, but he didn't move back home, and he continued to do what he was doing. And I know that God has no grandchildren. I know that he's one of God's kids. And I know that he knows about you, and I know he knows where the answer is. And he called me up one Monday and at work, and he was crying, and he said he thought he had a problem with alcohol and he needed help. And God had me committed to talking a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that night, and I couldn't do anything. And I had to call some young people I know in Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I don't think we can do it for our own children. You have to do it for my son, and I have to be available for your daughter, but I don't think we can do it for our own children. And some young men took him to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he called me the next day, and he had gotten the book, and called me the next day, and he was reading the book, and I called him the next day, and no, he didn't have time to go to a meeting, but he was reading the book, and he never did go to another meeting, but he was reading the book, and I kept saying, "Patrick, I don't understand. I mean, I got to go to meetings. I'm 20-some years sober. I got to go to meetings. I don't understand." Well, I guess it was a powerful book. He got it from the Bellflower Big Book group, if any of you are familiar with that group, but I guess they have some powerful stuff going on there, and he was reading the book, and he wasn't going to meetings, and in January, about 2:30 in the morning, on my answering machine was the message, "Mom, I'm in jail. I got picked up for drunk driving. I'm in jail." I haven't heard from him since. I'm not sure where he is or what he's doing, but I don't have that horrible pain. I don't have that pain that made me sit on my couch that I couldn't do anything about. I don't have that pain that's crippling me, because I've taken one right action after one right action after one right action. I don't have that pain that's immobilizing me, because I've come here to be with you. You see, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to continue to choose to recover in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't have it. I'm a coward. Cowards drink and use. I know that because I did that on a daily basis for 13 years. I don't have the courage and strength that it takes. But at the end of the meeting, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer, and the person on this side is going to give me a little courage, and the person on this side is going to give me a little strength, and you're going to give me the courage and strength that I need to take one more right action. I'm going to give it to you, and somebody's going to give it to somebody else. And we're all going to get exactly the right amount of courage we need in order to do this thing for another day. I know my son is God's kid. I know that there's a path for each of us. I can't control his path any more than anybody could have controlled mine. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous for that. I came here to stay out of jail. That's all I wanted out of this deal. And if I'd have had it my way, I'd have shortchanged myself. When I was 4 days sober, an old man told me if I didn't drink, I wouldn't get drunk. And if I didn't get drunk, my life would get different. And the thing that I end with, and I always end with it because it's been my experience, and I pray, God, that it's your experience. It's a line in chapter 5 that we heard read tonight. It's a line that says, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Thank you.